You walk into a room full of people. Everyone seems to be talking, laughing, effortlessly moving from one conversation to the next like it's the most natural thing in the world. And you're standing there, drink in your hand, smile on your face, wondering why it feels so much harder for you than it looks for everyone else. You want to join in. You want to feel that warmth, but something invisible keeps you just outside of it. Like there's a circle of light you can see clearly but can't quite step into. And the longer you stand there, the more certain you become of one quiet, humiliating thought. Everyone here can do this, except me. If you've felt this in a room, at a party, at work, in a new city, or even with people you've known for years, this is not a personality flaw. This is not shyness. This is not proof that you're broken or incapable of love. This is your nervous system doing something very specific, something it learned to do a long time ago, and the science behind it will completely change how you see yourself. Let's start with the question nobody asks. Why does connecting feel easy for some people and almost physically painful for others? The answer is not confidence. It's not social skills. It's not practice or effort or willpower. The answer, according to decades of attachment research, is something far more fundamental and far less your fault. Your brain is not a blank slate when it comes to connection. It arrives at every new relationship, every new room, every new person carrying a template, a set of unconscious predictions about what connection means, what it costs, and whether it's safe to reach for. That template was written before you had the language to describe it. Psychologist John Bowlby spent decades developing what he called attachment theory, the idea that the human brain is wired, from birth, to seek proximity to caregivers as a survival strategy. Infants who successfully attached to a responsive, reliable caregiver learned something foundational. Reaching for connection works. The world is safe. Other people can be trusted. Vulnerability leads to warmth. But not every infant received that response. Mary Ainsworth, Bowlby's colleague and researcher, identified what happens when caregivers are inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or unresponsive. The infant's attachment system, the biological drive to connect, doesn't switch off. It adapts. It develops what Ainsworth called insecure attachment, not a wound in the dramatic sense, but a recalibration, a quiet internal update that says, reaching for people doesn't always work. Be careful, be ready, don't need too much. And that recalibration doesn't stay in childhood. Mary Main, developmental psychologist at UC Berkeley, spent years studying how early attachment patterns translate into adult behavior. What she found was that adults with avoidant attachment histories develop what she called a deactivating strategy. When closeness increases, when vulnerability or need or intimacy rises, the nervous system doesn't move toward connection. It actively suppresses the impulse. Thoughts about the relationship become dismissive. The person becomes suddenly busy or critical or intellectually detached. What looks from the outside like indifference or coldness is actually a nervous system working at full capacity to protect itself from something it learned a long time ago is dangerous. And here's where it gets deeply personal. You may not recognize yourself as someone with an avoidant attachment style. You might think of yourself as independent, private, selective. You might say you value deep connection, you just haven't found the right people. You might tell yourself that most people aren't worth knowing well, and believe it. But underneath that independence, there is often something quieter, a longing that never quite goes away, the ache of watching other people connect effortlessly and not understanding why the same thing feels so difficult for you, the frustration of wanting closeness and something inside you pulling back every time it gets real. That pull is not a character flaw. It is a protection strategy your nervous system built because at some point, connection came with cost. Now let's go deeper, because attachment is only part of the story. Stanford psychologist Jamil Zaki has spent years studying what he calls the social anxiety paradox. His research, published as part of the 2025 World Happiness Report, found something both validating and sobering. People who struggle to connect with others consistently underestimate how kind, open, and interested in connection the people around them actually are. In study after study, participants expected other people to be colder, more judgmental, and less interested in them than they actually were. They predicted rejection and received warmth. They predicted awkwardness and found genuine interest. They stayed silent to protect themselves from embarrassment and never discovered that the person next to them was equally hoping someone would start a conversation. Zaki calls this the empathy gap, the distance between how warm and available people actually are and how cold and unavailable our nervous systems tell us they are. And here's what makes this so devastating. The protection that felt necessary, the guardedness, the reserve, the careful management of how much you reveal and when, actively prevents the very thing it was designed to protect. You hold back to avoid rejection, but holding back is itself a kind of withdrawal, and withdrawal reads to the people around you as disinterest, so they don't reach toward you and your nervous system says, "See, I told you, nobody reaches, nobody is really interested, keep the walls up." The clinical term for this is a self-confirming prophecy. Your prediction of rejection creates the behavior that produces the outcome that confirms the prediction. The cycle is invisible, it feels like truth, and it runs without your permission. Psychologist Susan Johnson, developer of emotionally focused therapy and author of Hold Me Tight, describes what happens in this cycle with devastating precision. She writes that what looks like indifference or emotional unavailability in adults is almost always, at the deepest level, an attachment protest, a nervous system trying to get a question answered that it doesn't yet know how to ask directly. The question is always the same. Are you safe? Are you really there? If I need you, will you stay? And because the nervous system has learned not to ask the question directly, because asking was answered with absence or inconsistency or criticism, it finds other ways to manage the longing. It gets busy, it gets intellectual, it focuses on flaws in the other person. It decides, quietly and without announcement, that connection is fine but not necessary, that it can survive alone, that needing people is a weakness rather than a fundamental biological fact. But here's what science says about that survival strategy. It costs more than it protects. Research from the American Public Health Journal found that social isolation carries health risks comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy declared loneliness a public health epidemic, not because people are physically alone, but because millions are surrounded by others and still unable to feel genuinely seen. The disconnection is not circumstantial, it is neurological, and it is treatable. Now, here's what nobody talks about, and this is the part that matters most. The reason connecting feels so hard is not that you're bad at it. It's that your nervous system is doing its job too well. When the threat detector in the brain, the amygdala, has been trained by early experience to associate vulnerability with risk, it does exactly what it's designed to do. It scans new social situations for danger. It notices ambiguous cues and interprets them as negative. A moment of silence becomes rejection. A brief distraction becomes disinterest. A slight delay in a reply becomes evidence of exactly what you feared. And the more the threat detector fires, the less access you have to the part of the brain that handles curiosity, warmth, openness, and genuine interest in other people. The prefrontal cortex, the part that can override the alarm and say, actually, this is safe, goes offline under threat, and what's left is a nervous system running old software in a new situation, seeing danger in a room full of people who just want someone to talk to. So what actually helps? The first thing is the hardest, and that is to stop trying to think your way out of this. You cannot convince your nervous system that connection is safe by reasoning with it. The threat detector doesn't respond to logic, it responds to experience. Repeated, gradually accumulated experience that says, this person stayed, this moment of vulnerability was met with warmth, the risk was taken, and the outcome was survivable. Psychologist Robert Zajonc studied what he called the mere exposure effect, the finding that familiarity, by itself, breeds liking and comfort. Not deep intimacy, not grand gestures, just showing up again, being present again, having the same conversation at a slightly deeper level than the last time. The nervous system learns safety the same way it learns danger, slowly, through repetition, through accumulated evidence that gradually rewrites the prediction. The second thing is to recognize what Jamil Zaki calls the underestimation of others. The people in that room are not as cold, as judgmental, or as uninterested as your nervous system is telling you they are. They are almost certainly quieter versions of the same fear. Most people, when approached with genuine curiosity and warmth, respond with genuine curiosity and warmth. The experience you're protecting yourself from, rejection, judgment, the humiliation of being seen and found lacking, happens far less often than your threat detector predicts. And the third thing, the thing that changes everything, is to understand that
The goal is to become someone who finds connection worth the discomfort. Because it will be uncomfortable. The nervous system trained to protect against closeness doesn't simply relax because you decided it should. It protests, it looks for exits, it generates 100 convincing reasons why this particular person, this particular moment, this particular attempt is not worth it. And the practice, the slow, unglamorous, profoundly important practice, is to stay anyway. To keep the conversation going past the point where your system wants to close it down. To share something slightly more true than you planned to ask a question that signals genuine interest rather than polite engagement. Susan Johnson says that real intimacy is not built in the grand moments. It is built in the accumulated micro moments of reaching and being reached, the small repairs after awkward silences, the willingness to be slightly foolish or uncertain or imperfect in front of another person and discover that they don't leave. Each of those moments is new data for a nervous system that has been working from old data for a very long time. You are not someone who can't connect. You are someone whose nervous system learned, in conditions that no longer exist, that connection was costly. The conditions have changed. The data can change too, not all at once, not in a single conversation or a single room or a single decision to be more open, but in the slow, patient accumulation of moments where you chose to stay in the warmth just a little longer than felt comfortable. And one day, not dramatically, not with fanfare, you will realize that the circle of light you spent so long standing outside of has shifted, and you are standing inside it. Not because you finally figured out how to be someone different, but because you gave your nervous system enough new evidence to update what it believed was true. If this is making sense, if this is describing something you've carried for a long time without having the words for it, subscribe, because this is what every video on this channel does. It takes the things happening inside you that nobody ever explained, and it gives them a name, a reason, and a way forward. The next video is waiting for you.